Welcome to YMT112 Algorithm and Programming 2. This is a tutorial session for Chapter 13. We are still speaking about the graphical user interface applications, and this is the second part. In the first part, we spoke about some components that we have on our window or the graphical interface that we create. For this session, we will speak about other type of components that we usually need while designing GUI applications. So we will go straight away to the question. Let's start by designing a simple, window which holds two main components that we didn't learn. Actually, we learned about this one before, but for this component, we didn't exactly learn about it. It seems to us as a list, but this is not exactly the list that we have learned before. So let's just go through the question and then start coding it. Design a simple GUI that has a list of your courses. We can use the course codes because if we type the name of the courses in full, it will take much time. We will just list some of the course codes as a list, and then we will see how we can use them as a component on a window. So if an element is selected, so these are elements of our list, then it should be displayed to a selection text field. So we have a text field here, and I have a point. We explained about it before, but I have a point to add it because I will teach you something new about not to have it non-editable. That means we create a text field where the user cannot edit or enter anything to it other than just the selections that we have from here automatically by the carried out automatically by the window itself. Use the provided screenshot below as a reference. So this is your reference. You don't have to care much about the title here. You can change it to the title you like. However, stick to the requirements here of creating a list, and then we can see how we can select an element, and this element should be displayed to this area of a text field. So let's go through the components. We have the window, the container itself. We have a list here, okay? And this is a special type of a list, so we will see how we can create it. Then we have a label, and then we have a text field to display something in it. This text field is familiar. We will just add to it some specification or setting. Label is also familiar. We created labels before. This one is somehow new, and we will see how we will create it and register its own action. Let's go to Netbeans and start creating our class. So we will be using basic packages that we usually use. We will import the javax, the swing from javax, and we will need also the event from the same package or class. I explained about the need for these components actually before. So if you wonder, you need to get back to previous sessions, and you'll learn about the reason why we, for example, import swing, then we import the event from swing. We explained about it. I don't want to go through it again. We need also the AWT or some of the components. Okay, let's bring all the classes. So we bring all its components, we import all its components. So now, as we always do, what we have here, we have a class. I created the class, give it a name of course list. Then what I'm going to do is I will extend the functionality or the components of the JFrame as a parent class to course list, so that we don't have to get to the class as base class subclass in basic sense. Here what we are going to have is all the methods that we are interested in ready to use, so we don't have to import and so on. Instead of that, we just use it as a base, as a superclass we extend this functionality and methods of what we have in it, then we can use it in the base class course list. So basically in this case, we will not need to have extra steps. We explained about this one also before, so it's just a matter of a preference. Some people wouldn't go for this, but I am sure this is a more convenient way to extend the functionality of the JFrame class, use it as a superclass, then get convenient access to its methods without referencing or whatsoever. Okay, so let's create our private attributes. What do we have? Now, first thing, we need to have a panel to place our components on. So we need to create a panel for the list of courses. We need also to create a panel for the selection, okay? And we need to create a list, because we have a list of courses, so that we place it on the course panel. Then we need to create text field also, and then we need to create a label to display a message before the text field. So these are the components. Let's go ahead and create them. So we have JPanel. Again, I give it a name, course panel, something that makes sense to our own application that we have here. Okay, course panel. Then we have another panel. Let me not terminate. I can use the same definition here, the same declaration. So let me just add selection, course select, not selection, selected course panel, because we have a course panel, the one you just saw here. Let me show you again, this one. And we need for the selected course another panel here, so that we know how to place them in an organized way. So we created these two. Now we need to add some more private attributes. We have a JList, so that we create our own list. Call it, for example, course list. It makes sense because we are speaking about list of courses. JList, this is capital, so I don't want to make these typos. Okay, then we have the text field, as I mentioned, so private also. J text field is also capital. Okay, text field, and I call it, for example, in this case, selected course. Okay. What do we have? We have also the label, so we need to create a private also, private J label as well. And we need to create a label, call it a label, or if you like, you can give it any other name. That's pretty much of it for the components. And I usually receive this question about, why do we create them private? You don't want anyone to mess up with them. So you need to restrict the access to these components to your class, and if there is any subclass referencing it, in that case, you allow the access to these components, but you don't want an outside code to access to them, change them intentionally or unintentionally, and mess up with their specifications. And this is what we call the concept of data hiding, and I'm sure you are familiar with it up until now. Okay, one more thing. Now we have a list. So we created the components that we need, but how about the list? Where is it? We need to create it and also set it to private. That's much better to save its component, as I just said, from unintended or unintended access. Okay, now this list has multiple names or multiple elements. So how can we create such a list? In this case, we have to use an array. This is the best way for us to have multiple components under the same name, and that will just fit our purpose exactly. So we're creating an array, and this array is of string type. Why? Because we speak about list of names. Okay, so since it is list of names, we will have the course codes. I will start by YMT111. You create your own courses because you may have different courses from your friends, so you do it to fit your own courses. Okay, YMT113. Let's just go as a sequence. For example, YMT114. And now, to save time, what I'm going to do, I'll just copy and paste this and change the names or the numbers, not names actually. YMT will be the same in this case. We don't want to go too much long. We keep our border of like this. By convention, we keep this border so that we don't cross it. It's more readable, more visible. Now we change those because we already created them. Let's see, what do we have? Yes, 18, yes, 18. Then another rhythm, 210. Then 211. And then 218. Let's have another row. Okay, so 220 and then 221. As I said, I'm just filling up from my own mind, so you can just think about any course code that you have. Okay, 222. Let's go for 225 or 8. 8 is okay. Okay. So we have already filled up this list. You can go further. You can have more components or elements if you want. These are elements, not components, okay? So now we have created our private attributes, so we need to go to the constructor. We have to create a constructor, and this constructor will just have the basic establishment of our own class. So we need to specify the basic elements of our window. The first thing, we need to set up the title. So as I said earlier, this method is coming from where? From the JFrame, because we have it as a superclass, so we can access to this method without any referencing, without using JFrame, without importing it, without having jframe.setTitle. So that's why I say it's more convenient to have this method of creating a superclass JFrame and extending its functionality to a subclass, and then using all its methods that we need in order for us to write or create a GUI. Okay, so what were we using as a title? Let me stick to the question. Course list demo. Okay, course list demo. Okay, that's good enough. Let me terminate, and then now next to that, the basic functionality, we need termination of the window itself. How can we terminate it? Set default close operation, close operation, and this is by default, as we always do, jframe dot exit on close. All right, what's next? We can set the size. I don't bother about the size. I taught you how to stretch it if you are interested, unless you have a very professional component that you want to set its size at the beginning. So one more thing. Now let me get to the Word file and explain. Now look, we have a component here, and then we have two components under it. Well, I think you are getting the idea. We have to use some layout. Why? If we do not set some sort of layout, we will not have this list, and under it another component. So we have one panel here, we have another panel here, and in that case we will be able to set them based on some layout. We can use the border layout. Why? Because we can use two of its own regions, and in that case we can have the components or these panels, one on top and one under. For example, you can use center and south, or if you that looks more fit, center and south. If you are more interested in having like a space in between, maybe you can put north and south, but that would leave some space in between. You can try it. Let's just set the layout first and then see how things go. Okay, layout, and then we need to create our own layout, new border layout. Okay, layout. I've already created my layout, and then now I created two panels here. Sorry, I declared for them. I have to create them, so I have to build them. We explained about this before. The best way to lower the complexity of your own class is to separate the let's say the building of components to separate functions or separate methods, so that you have more readable class components or class structure. Okay, so build. First we need course panel, and then we have another one for the selected course panel. Okay, build also, build selected course panel. Now these names are up to you. You know the rules for naming a method, so just use whatever fits you. I choose something that makes sense to us, something gives the indication of what we are doing. So now we created our main components. We need to place them where on their exact regions. So we can use add, which is a method from the superclass. Okay, so we will add what? Course panel. Okay, and where? I'll place it to the center. It seems to me now here, this is exactly in the center, and this one to the south. Okay, so border layout, and then dot center. Okay, and then we will do the same to the other component, add the other component that we need to visualize and see, selected course panel. Okay, border layout dot not comma, I'm sorry, dot south. Okay, so that's pretty much of it for the constructor. The constructor will just start, once we instantiate our class, it would be called by default and start operating or start running all these methods. So that's why we created at the beginning, before, right next to the definition or the declaration of all your attributes. Now what we did is just setting up the basic components of the window itself. Now we need to create these components. Okay, so we start by the build course panel. Let's try to define its own function. All right, keep it private. Why? Because we don't actually need any access to it from the outside or any outside code. Build, it was lowercase, build panel, course panel, sorry, course panel. Okay, then we don't have any argument list. Now in this case, what I'm going to do, let me zoom this one. Yeah. We need to create the course panel components, or we need to start actually setting up the course panel. Now this one is the course panel. Let me show you this one, this part. So I have a list, and I place this list on a panel, then my panel is already added to the center. Okay. So the first component, we need to define or declare course panel. Since we are going to place our component or components, actually in this case component but multiple elements, to this panel. Okay, new jpanel, like what we usually do. Okay, I don't have to define anything now. Okay, then we need to define the course list. Okay, and we will use a list, JList, that's capital list. Okay, and also in that case I don't have to define anything other than just saying that I have the list as my courses. What's courses? Now look, so you have a list, and this list is composed of multiple elements as an array, one-dimensional array, okay, of multiple names. All right, that's pretty much of it. Now one more thing, this is the thing that, well, we are somehow familiar with this. The only difference is, like, we are using a list of elements. Now the new thing is, how about the selection? What kind of action will be taken if I'm going to use this? So what we expect is, if you click on this one, it shows down here. Okay, it's a basic functionality. We will go deeper in a while, but just a basic functionality that shows you how things can be registered and run or operated in such list scenario. Right, so what we are going to do is, we need to have the selection mode, because we have different selections. We can have the single selection mode, or we can have the multiple selection mode, or multiple interval. We will have them soon. We will just try with the first thing, with the basic functionality. We have course list. This is our course list dot set selection. Okay, so we have the selection now, not index, selection mode. Okay, mode, not model, mode, sorry. Okay, so we need to set the selection mode, and then after that, let's start by the single selection. Single selection allows you to just pick up one only, just one element at a time. Okay, list selection model. So as I said, we have different models of selections. We have the multiple interval selection, we have single interval selection, and we have single selection. I will go for the simplest one now, single selection. Okay, and I'll show you about the others in a while. I think I made a mistake here. Set selection, yeah, of course, not selected, set selection. Okay, so that's pretty much of it for the single selection. We need just to show or display only one element at a time, and that will be carried to the text box as a display of a sort of an output in this window. Okay, so we set up our selection. What will happen? So if we select, we need to register this action. So I select, then what will happen? So this is what we learned before. We need to create an action and register it. Okay, list. Then we need to add. Okay, course list. Okay, add list selection listener. I don't want to make typos here. Listener. Okay, and then I place my new list listener. You can call it whatever name you like, but use the name of a class that makes sense. Let me see if I made any mistake. No. Okay, seems fine to me. So this one is coming with a swirly red line here. Why? Because we haven't yet created the list listener. The way we used to create for the button listener and similar things, we are also creating for the list listener. So we create a class to register the action of the selection from the list. So once we click on an item or element, what happens? So this is the action. We register it, then we implement the action listener, and in that case we will see how we can manipulate the action and create or customize it the way we like. Okay, course panel. This is the last part of every you can say method that we create for building a panel. We need to add it. Okay, we need to add the component to the panel. Okay, so we need to add this component that I just created, course list, to the panel. Now I created my panel, I customized my course list, created it as a list, and then I set up the type or the model of selection. I registered its action. I haven't yet implemented the action listener. We will do it soon. Then I place the component to the panel. So remember these steps, okay? Next to that, now we are done with the first part. So what we need to do is simply, we need to have the second panel built. So we have another panel, private, the one you just see here. Okay, build, selected, no, selected, course panel, and also it's a void, so we don't expect anything to come from it or as a return, and we don't expect any argument list coming to it, or we don't have any parameters to be listed as as a receiver of arguments. So we don't have any arguments to be received to this method. Okay, so what do we have in this build selected course panel? Now look, as I explained earlier, this was the one we just created here. Okay, so we had a panel where we placed the courses as a list on it. Then we registered, we set up the type of or the model of the selection. Then we registered this action. We will build, implement this action soon. Then we are moving to the second part here. We have two components, so we need to know how to set them up. So initially we have the selected course panel. We need to declare for it the way we did here. So selected course panel, and then that's equal to jpanel as we did earlier. And then what we need to do, we have a label. Okay, of course I have to instantiate. All right. So remember up here we defined some label. So we need to use it, and we need to use the text field. So these are our components. So we need to define our label. Okay, label equals new JLabel. And remember what's written or what's typed in there. I also do not remember. Let me check. Okay. So we need to provide it. You're selected, or you selected. Yes, you selected with colon. Okay. You selected with colon here. Okay, that's enough. And then we have the other component. We need to have the text field where we are going to display our selection. Okay, so selected course. This is a text field equals new JText field. Okay, and then we need to set up the size. Now for our names, we have 3 letters and 3 integers, 6, so we can set it up to 10 fields of the size. I mean, here, let me show you this view, how many the max. You can customize it the way you like. If your names are long, you can extend its own size. This is just an integer that provides the length of your text field to be displayed. Now one thing, I don't want this text to be editable, so I set it non-editable. So in that case, I will just use its own method, selected course dot. Now what we need to do, we need to set editable okay? And then we need to provide the type of whether it is editable or not. I say it's false, it's not editable, okay? So you can just use it. You cannot provide or insert anything to it or change its content, okay? So now that's pretty much of our components. We need to place them. So place them now. Look, it's extremely important. Which comes first? The label, then next to that the text field. So place the label first, then the text field. So we have one panel. We need to place our components on it. Then we can place it, or actually it is already set to our window because we did earlier. Okay, so selected course panel, and we need to add. We need to use add, and here we have to provide the label first, as I said, terminate, then we use the same selected course panel, and then we add our text field. What was its name? Selected course. Okay, selected course. All right, selected, this is lowercase. Okay, so that's pretty much of it for this method. So we are still having this swirly line because we haven't yet implemented the action listener. Now we are going to do it. Use private class, and again I say private because we don't have any need to access to this class or any components of those from outside, from any outside code or any outsider, let's say, connection or relation. In that case, we need to create a list listener. Stick to the same name that you give. It doesn't matter what kind of name you give, just use the same name. Otherwise, you will get stuck with the same problem, like it will not be defined if you do not use the same name here. All right, implements list selection listener. Okay, and then this is a class, so we instantiate its scope. Okay, now it's still, this swirly line is gone from here. Now we have a swirly line, and as you know, this is an implementation of an interface, and when we implement an interface, we have to override all abstract methods that we have. So in that case, there is specifically one method we need to override. So this method is public void value changed. Value v is lowercase, value changed. Okay, and this is special for the lists. Okay, so value changed, we have an action, so this action must be mentioned list. It's a capital. Okay, it's a capital, this one, list selected, not selected, selection event. Okay, and you can give any name here, maybe E or whatever you like. Now look at this. This green circle shows that we have already created the method that we are supposed to implement. What sounds to us here is everything is okay, but if you do not create your own implementation, you keep it empty, you will not get the expected outcome. So we need to customize the implementation of this overridden method. So what are we going to do? We will use a string to create the selection of the user. The user will select one of the elements that we have on the list, so we need to customize it. And remember, in this case, our selection is a string, so we have to cast our selection to a string to make sure that it is a string and it doesn't have any integer or whatever, any other value. So we have the course list. Okay, this is exactly what we need to have our action on. We created the action here, and we will use a method called get selected value. Okay, selected. You can see we have actually, let me explain here. Okay, I get the chance. Get selected index. We will explain about this one later on if we get the time, hopefully, yes. Get selected value. So this is the value or the element selected by the user. Get selected value list. This is another type also, selected background, foreground, selection mode, model. So all these are methods, but for the time being, we are interested in the selected value. Okay, so get selected value, and that's it. Now we terminate here, and then we move to the last part of this implementation. We get the selected value. So what are we going to do with the selection? So we need to say place it to the text as an output here. See, this is the output placement, or the where we are supposed to place our output. We need to provide that in there. So selected a course, and then I say dot set text. What is the text that you want me to set in there? Is the selection. Okay, that's pretty much of it. The last piece of this program is instantiating our class. So we created a class. We need to use a main method to instantiate it, public static void main, and then we instantiate directly. We're not going to use it other than just instantiation, or we just create an instance of it so that it runs for us. What did I call it? Course list, not list window, course list. Okay, all right, and that's pretty much of it. Let's just run. Okay, so I'm going to run it and see how things go. Seems I'm missing something. Let me just run again. Oh, of course, I forgot something extremely important. If I do not set it to visible here, I wouldn't be able to see anything. Okay, great. Set visible. That's good, actually. Great, we had that problem so that you see how things may go when you do not set the whole thing that we have here to visible. One thing I also forgot. I need to pack the all these elements together. Pack. Okay. Packing is like okay, we have these panels, so we're just packing them up on the window, then set to visible. Of course, for sure that was my mistake earlier. Yes, for sure. It's just more of like forgetting these components, not exactly a mistake. So as I said, I didn't set the size. We can stretch it out, and we can use the way we like here. Now look, course list demo. These are our courses. Now the thing that I will ask from you after we explain about this one, I mean, a basic thing, I forgot T here, YMT, it doesn't matter. So let's select here, YMT112, maybe another selection here, another selection here. So once you select any of these elements, it will just display to the screen right over here. And that's exactly what we are looking for. Now let me just fix this one wherever I made a mistake, YMT. Let me see, YMT. Can see it, okay, YMT. All right, so now one thing I want from you, I explained about it in previous sessions, one of the previous sessions. I can't remember, I think the last session, yes. What we need to do is simply we need to have some border, outside border, customizing this border. So you use border factory border, okay? Try to do it. Zoom the size. I want you to do it on your own. It's not tough, it's really easy. I need you to zoom it a little bit and provide to it like an outlier. Use the factory border, and that will help you to create a border for it so that the visualization will be nice. So that's pretty much of it for the first question. We will create other sessions. Until then, have a good time. Goodbye.